grappling with in this new working from home life? How do we actually get the right balance? What do we do? What are some strategies we can have if we are a leader? What do we do if we're individuals? Lindsay will share her insights with us. She has worked with many international brands such as John Lewis and Experian to help their leaders develop engagement strategies with the people. Uh, Lindsay is based in the UK, and we appreciate her taking time out of her busy schedule to
Thank
speak
you.
to all of us today. Ladies and gentlemen, Lindsay Murdoch.
Thank you. Thanks, Sam. I just put this up front as a bit of fun, really. And I think it sums it up for a lot of us. This poor man, a bit aghast, not knowing whether he's working from home or living at work. So that just gives us a little bit of a cartoon for the backdrop of today. I'm going to talk a bit about resilience and a bit about work-life balance and give some time for questions at the end. But I've tried to make this practical as well. So there's some different slides with hints and tips in. And I believe if you should decide that you want them, that Sam's team would actually send the slides to you afterwards, but that's up to you. You need to decide whether you think any of this is worthwhile. So let's move on. I will probably manage the questions at the end, but let's see how it goes. I actually wanted to look at this as an important area and how this is actually really about leadership challenges. If leaders can actually build resilient organisations, it's true that those organisations will perform better and therefore survive in the current sort of economic downturn. But we all have different levels of resistance and we all have different work-life balance requirements. So actually, that's quite a challenge for us and the leaders of our organisations. I thought we'd just ponder a minute on why this is sort of important right now. And what happened to me, and I think happened to a lot of us, was suddenly I wasn't at work in an office, I wasn't with my clients anymore, and I was working from home. I didn't have a home office. My husband had to give me his office, and that put in stresses and strains in terms of how was he going to do his job, and we've all had to grapple with similar. Some organisations only had limited sort of digital capabilities. Suddenly we all had to make Teams work, learn about Zoom, and indeed how could we get onto the organisation's server if that hadn't been set up for us before. The whole COVID piece has driven such uncertainty where people might consider whether they're going to be able to keep their role or get a new role. And actually my own contract was terminated early in the wake of the whole COVID piece. So actually I know what this all feels like myself. And what we really need to do is understand within this uncertainty how we might actually be able to cope mentally and physically and actually continue to perform. I thought we should actually ponder a minute on what resilience is and to understand that we can build our levels of resilience as we go through life and work and deal with many of the different sort of challenges that are around us. And it's something about knowing how to cope with different setbacks, how we might manage change and live with ambiguity, and what we're really willing to do to overcome obstacles. It is about emotional strength, but our brains can build this strength as we go through different circumstances. So my summary was really that it's the capability to remain flexible and strong in the midst of ambiguity and change. And that just happens to be my definition it's not something I got out of a textbook. It's something that I've developed over the years in terms of my experience. It may not be your definition, but I suspect you'll be somewhere around that. So there's a huge responsibility with leaders to be creating resilience in their organisation. But let's pause a minute. Leaders come at all different levels in an organisation and at all different facets. So what I'm saying could easily apply to the CEO, a functional head, a program leader, someone who is leading a sales team, and each of them in their different positions have the challenge, if you like, in how to help their people cope, manage and learn, and their organisations to prosper. And I think that this area will actually differentiate leaders in terms of how they do manage the aftermath of COVID, and how they do actually help their organisations or their piece of the organisation face into the economic challenges. It is clear, and it is in the textbooks, that resilient organisations are high performing organisations. But to do that, wherever you are positioned as a leader in an organisation, I believe it's absolutely right that you as a leader can provide the direction that the organisation needs to go in. Some colleagues and I have been looking at leadership post-COVID, and I'm going to be publishing an ebook quite soon in terms of 6 different categories of leadership. It's been up on LinkedIn, but I've chosen 3 categories, which is leading, engaging and caring, to actually try and bring this piece about the resilience and work-life balance alive. So, as I've said before, it's absolutely that the vision and direction is key, but leaders also have to have visibility. So what do I mean by that? If we are working from home, and I know now some of us are actually going back into the office 1 or 2 days a week, but how do you get a critical mass at that time? Leaders need to be visible and communicate, and really be using the tools, the technical tools, to be having 2-way conversations with their teams. They also do and are having to make some of the tough decisions. That addresses into the uncertainty, but I think they need to be clear in terms of those decisions, why they've made them, and make sure that the implementation, which could be job losses to people, is actually done ethically and allows people to retain their dignity should they be leaving. Engaging is building on the 2-way communications and actually helping to enable the teams to establish this work-life balance. And it is quite hard to use the tech in terms of understanding how people are and where they are, but you really have to listen carefully and watch for those telltale signs. What I've done with members of my team over this time, because I've been doing some part-time work, is I've had 10-minute touch points through Zoom every other day, but listening to some of the people in the team who just didn't like using Zoom, so they've just been 10-minute telephone calls. Caring is quite a contentious word to use. I think it may have been more contentious before COVID. I think now people are perhaps paying more attention to well-being, whereas before I feel that in a number of areas it could have just been a tick box. But what we need to be looking for are signs of stress and fatigue, watching for signs of presenteeism. I actually got up early to send an email myself this morning, and then I had to look and check that it wasn't too early, otherwise somebody would think I might be stressing out. And also looking to use a coaching style. So if we're hearing that some of our team are struggling with something, to be actually delving into that with them to help them solve that challenge themselves. So I think building resilience and looking towards the work-life balance is very much a leadership challenge. If got right, it will improve individual and team performance, but it's not just down to leaders. In my experience, this is actually as much down to ourselves as it is to the people that are leading us, and we can grow and develop our resilience. I went through something last week where one of my propositions got heavily pushed back. I'd put a lot of work into it, and I had to sort of accept that it didn't hit the mark, and then understand what I had to do to change it through listening to the potential client. So not be scared to adjust or course correct, but rather than sit down and get myself upset about it, I had to take the control of the situation and move on. I wanted just to tackle the fight or flight. It's a common response to anxiety, and I think we're actually programmed to protect ourselves and our families. So when we find ourselves in an ambiguous situation, or we get a knockback, somebody might challenge us heavily, we might feel nervous of losing our job. There is pretty much sort of two key responses: fight or flight. Neither of which, in my experience, are sort of long-term sustainable. And what we need to do here is to understand how we react. So look back and see how we've reacted to challenges in the past, and support ourselves in that state of that uncertainty. And I've been doing some mindfulness courses whereby I've learned to actually pause, count to 3, it says here, but probably 10, and then think about my response to be able to move on in a very measured way. But if you find yourself in that fight or flight state, it's human, it's natural, it's the way it is. But the important thing is how to move yourself through that. So I put in some top tips to help build resilience, because I wanted to make it practical. And if I had to pull out 2 things, one is understanding yourself, and the other is the power of the network. Because if you have people you've got strong relationships with, you can talk to, then that really helps you in terms of dealing with change and uncertainty and looking at practical ways forward. But I really would draw your attention to the second from bottom bullet point, to really remind yourself how amazing you are, and build on that in terms of all of the great things that you can do. And then to be looking at your work-life balance and how to actually create that so you can move forward. So moving on, because I'm a bit concerned I'm running out of time, so apologies. There is quite a lot here because it's 2 interrelated subjects. But work-life balance for me is about harmony, and you're looking at work, family, friends, and self. But this is not about each of those dimensions being equal. It's finding a harmonious state for you to be concentrating on each of those elements, and looking to see how you can achieve stuff at work, but also to enjoy it. I thought we would just pause for a moment in terms of why is it important, and I think it is really about that well-being. It contributes to well-being, and it does improve performance, which improves productivity and helps each of us create a sense of achievement and enjoyment, of course, which builds our resilience. So hopefully you can see how work-life balance and resilience are intertwined with each other in this way. Because we're all concerned about this topic, I just wanted to pull out some signs of the unhealthy work-life balance for leaders to consider and for ourselves to consider. And sometimes when I have such a huge to-do list and I can't find enough hours during the day, I feel really overwhelmed. Being on Zoom for most of my day actually makes me very tired, and that stress interrupts my sleep. And then you start to get to a state where you're unable to cope, and you could actually end up by missing deadlines, which will decrease the productivity of whatever it is you're trying to do. And so I think there are enough triggers in there for us and our leaders to be able to recognise, and then to actually talk with us in terms of how we might actually manage that. And again, I think the coaching skill is really important here. So again, trying to make this practical. Here are some ideas for leaders. And remember, I've said leaders can be at various different levels of an organisation. So at some point, we are all leaders and we are all employees. And as leaders, we need to create that right environment, have those two-way conversations, but above all, actually recognise that we're all different. So there is no one-size-fits-all answer for this. We are all different. And I think when we're sitting in that leadership space, sometimes we forget that we can just actually ask our people what they want, and then work with our employees in terms of shaping that better work-life balance for their good and for the organisation's good. But this isn't just down to leadership. And I think sometimes it's very easy to say, well, my boss never helped me, my boss never told me. But there are things that we can do. And I've put some more practical steps here in terms of the sorts of things that we should be looking at. And for me, the number one is always down to prioritisation, and to be using the tech to the best advantage, make space in my home and my life, and to actually set the work hours so that I'm not actually sitting there at midnight chained to my desk. But also, I think to get this harmony, it's time for our families, it's time for our children, making time for exercise and relaxation, the sorts of things that we like to do in terms of just taking a break. And playing all of these different elements in the harmony that we talked about actually is really sort of building resilience. So just in summary, I hope I've been able to demonstrate that resilience and the work-life balance, that harmony that we're looking for, are interlinked, that well-being is key. And we're doing this for our mental and physical health, but we're also doing it for business and individual performance. It's my belief that leaders actually set the scene, but we as individuals really do need to take control of our lives and how we actually respond to change and challenges, and how we actually build that work-life balance for ourselves. So thank you for listening to that. I hope that it has been helpful, and let's look at the questions.
That's great. Thank you very much, Lindsay. A real topic that we're all grappling with, and we don't all have the answers. While we're looking for some questions to come from the floor, a number of times you mentioned and used the word harmony. Would you like to share a bit more about why you're moving from balance to harmony?
I think that you do need to try and balance what you're doing in your life. And we talked about family, friends, work, sort of relaxation. But it's more than balance. A balance does give a bit of an impression of having everything sort of equal. In my head, I've got a 4-box matrix, and each of those elements is equal. Harmony is more than that. Not every part of how you work and manage your life needs to be equal. It's actually how you actually get all of those areas working in sync with each other, so that you actually are paying the right amount of attention to each of those aspects, which I feel is more of harmony than it is of balance.
Thank you. We're open for questions, and we noticed that Sunil Agarwal, the chair from APMP India, is here. Welcome, Sunil. Really nice to have you as a guest. Anyone who has any questions, please let us know. Lindsay would be happy to answer that.
There's one from an ex-colleague of mine, actually, called Mary Galbraith. We've worked together in terms of transformation programs throughout our careers, and she's asking, what research have you found useful to help understand this topic better? So I've done some research in terms of mindfulness recently, in terms of looking at how you can build your brain muscle to manage issues and challenges better. I don't know how else to put it. And I've read a couple of books, and I've done some seminars. The lady that's been running the seminar, she's called Jane Dunsby. And so if you're interested, I can provide that afterwards. Other research is typically Mr. Google and reports and analysis that come through that. There's a gentleman called Vijay Kumar. How do we unplug or switch off from work? Any hacks? Is that part of the question as well? When we are doing work from home. I think what I found in terms of that is actually having set hours in which I work. So I am an early bird. I start early, but then come 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I do need a break. That's when I might spend time with my family. It may be when I go out for a walk, and then I might start again, perhaps 6 o'clock, and do another couple of hours. So doing something in that time when I'm taking my break, like walking, appreciating nature. Nature is amazing, and appreciating nature really does help in terms of sort of switching off. For others, it might be reading stories to their children, because they are focused in the moment on their children and the activity that they are doing together. But remember what I said, everybody is different. And so within that, there will be things that you can put in place and things that you do which will enable you to switch off. Some people, it's playing computer games. I've had enough of the computer by the time I get to my break, but that's because we're all different. There's a question from Raveen Sen. What role do you feel healthy competition can play in separated teams, destructive or constructive? Now, when people say that's a good question, it's because they've got to think about the answer. I think that it can be destructive, because it's harder for people to see each other. What are they actually doing? What are they working on? What is the pace that they're working? I think perhaps to make it constructive, you could perhaps gamify whatever it is that you're doing, so that it does make it a bit of fun. And within that, you could do a points table and do rewards at the end of the week. So I think you need to be really careful how you set that up, And of course, you did say healthy competition, so that's where it can be fun and can be positive.
So we'll take one last question, and while the audience is looking for that question, I have one for you, Lindsay. You mentioned that when you started to work from home, you had to talk to your husband, and maybe he offered you the office or you commandeered it. How did it work out in the end?
So in terms of setting times where I work and he works, then we have found a way of sharing the office and sharing the desktop computer, which we use as the central source, if you like, and having an agreement whereby if one or either of us is in an emergency when we sort of relinquished the office, then where we can accommodate each other, we absolutely do, and that works well between us. But it's a real challenge, right? You can't just fabricate another room in your house to turn into an office, and like now, because the environment is better, I'm sitting at the dining room table. And so you just have to be flexible in terms of how you do that. And my poor husband has got strict instructions not to come in to his own dining room, which is open plan to his kitchen. So we really, really do have to have those conversations and be as flexible as we can with each other.
Thank you, Lindsay. Any other questions anyone has? Lindsay, it's been a real pleasure having you with us. And thank you so much for sharing that insight. Anyone would like a copy of Lindsay's slide, please drop us an email and we'd be more than happy to provide that for you. And we wish all of you the very best in adjusting to the new way of working. Indications are we'll never go back to being full-time in an office. So the question then comes, which is the best part of the country where you're in to relocate? And we're seeing more and more people moving out of the city and going into the countryside. But let's not all rush there. Keep doing the good work with all of you. And we look forward to welcoming you to the next webinar. And once again, thank you very much, Lindsay. Really appreciate that.
Thank you. The time went very quickly and I hope everybody enjoyed it.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Lindsay. Bye-bye. Thank you for the nice session.
Thank you, Lindsay.
Thank you. It was great, Lindsay. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye.